Okay, so we're going to talk about one of the most elusive things when you're looking at weight loss, and that is the 1200 calorie diet. If we looked at somebody that wanted to lose weight, we know that they need to be in a consistent calorie deficit. That means for a sustained period of time, they need less energy coming in through what they consume than their body is expending. Now, we may be led to believe that the bigger that you can make that gap or that deficit between what's coming in and what's going out, the quicker your weight loss will be, and ultimately you will get to your goal quicker. And that's true, that will happen. However, bigger is not always better. To add on to that, there's often this magical number thrown around of 1200 calories a day, which is either seen as something that you should aim for if you want to lose weight, or a number that is said to be dangerous and that you shouldn't drop below. Can you lose weight on a 1200 calorie diet? Absolutely you can, and you probably will. However, is it something that I would recommend, or is it the most optimal way of losing weight? Absolutely not. And in this video, I'm going to run through just a couple of points as to why 1200 calorie diets don't work in the long run. So you may be thinking that I just told you that a 1200 calorie diet does work, and then literally in the same sentence told you that it doesn't work. And the reason why it's not recommended, or it's not going to be optimal for weight loss, is multifactorial. It's not just a physiological thing, but it's also a psychological, if not more so psychological than physiological. However, the first thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is something that I think is often forgot when especially someone's trying to lose weight, and that is that your body is constantly burning energy, and it requires a certain amount of energy every single day to simply be alive. Even if you just woke up and did absolutely nothing all day, you are still burning energy every single minute of every single day. Just sitting there right now watching this video, regardless of what you're doing, your body is using energy. So you need energy coming in. You wouldn't put no fuel in your car and expect it to run. So why would we do that to our bodies? Just as waking up in the morning and being alive is using energy, but then we're doing lots of stuff on top of that we don't even factor into it that is also burning energy, such as eating and digesting food, talking and moving, going and doing exercise, whatever it is that we're doing, all of this is expending energy too. So the minimum amount of energy or calories that your body requires to simply just wake up and be alive is called your basal metabolic rate. Now, how much this number is different for everybody, depending on things like your gender, your height, your weight, your body composition, and your age as well. But to give you a vague idea, the average BMR for females is between 14 and 1500 calories a day. And that's just the calories required for simply being alive. That doesn't even account for the other ways that your body is burning calories throughout the day, such as any exercise that you might do, or all the non-exercise like fidgeting, or maybe cooking, or going to the grocery store, or walking to work, or even the way that your food is digested and used within your body. That requires energy too. Collectively, if we include all those other ways of burning energy, we're looking at your total daily energy expenditure, and that's usually as an average between 2000 and 2200 for females. Like I mentioned, this varies depending on so many different factors, but the reason I wanted to mention this is because I wanted to highlight just how low that number is in comparison to even just your BMR. Your body is showing up for you each and every day doing incredible things, but it does require a certain amount of energy to even do the basic functions. You can put yourself in a calorie deficit that's a little bit smaller, and you'll be able to achieve weight loss perfectly safely and in a relatively easy way. But if you drop it to 1200 calories, there's a significant difference, and you're going to be making it so much harder for yourself. And here's some of the reasons why. Now, in my opinion and my experience working with people trying to lose weight and also losing a significant amount of weight myself, the most important reason as to why 1200 calorie diets really just don't work in the long run is the psychological aspect. Willpower has its limit. You may think that you have the strongest willpower in the world, but realistically 1200 calories is not a lot of food, and eventually you will get to a point where you can't sustain that. Honestly, you may think that you will be able to, and there is probably a few people that will be able to, but for the most part it is extremely difficult for you to consistently eat 1200 calories a day and have that much of a deficit. Firstly, in the short term, you're going to have to contend with the fact that you're going to be really quite hungry. If you're trying to achieve weight loss, the chances are that reducing your energy intake to 1200 calories a day is going to be a significant drop from what you're used to eating. And while when you're in a calorie deficit, we expect you to notice and experience a certain level of hunger, with this much of a drop in calories, you're going to experience a lot more hunger, and that can be really challenging to overcome. There really aren't a huge amount of ways around this. Your body is going to be sending signals to your brain to tell you to eat because it expects more food and it needs more food, and it's going to be very hard to fight that. To put that number in perspective, if you split 1200 calories a day into meals and snacks, you're looking at 300 calories for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and then 300 calories for snacks, or just 400 calories for breakfast, lunch and dinner, which means there's going to be absolutely no snacks, and that means drinks are included as well. For that reason, if you wanted to still have some of the more calorie dense and more enjoyable foods in your diet that you're used to, which will ultimately help you stay on track in the long term, then it's going to be harder to fit that into 300 or 400 calories a meal. Whereas if you went the alternative route and completely cut those things out and opted for the more higher volume, lower calorie foods, you may feel that you're restricting yourself a lot more, and it's going to be hard to sustain that over a long period of time because, like I say, willpower has its limits. I say this all the time, and I probably will never stop saying it, but weight loss is not a short-term solution. It is something that you have to really think about it as a long-term and sustainable lifestyle rather than just something you're going to do and then it's going to be over with. Try to approach it more like a marathon and less like a sprint. If you can eat in a calorie deficit, still be able to go out for dinner with your friends, still eat the foods that you love, but also be able to make some choices that are going to optimize your diet in terms of maybe higher volume, lower calorie foods as well, you're going to be in the perfect position. It's like chef's kiss. That's what you want to achieve. And trying to speed it up and race it along, not only is it not going to work in the short term, but ultimately it's not going to work in the long term either. Have people lost weight on 1200 calorie diets? Yes. Have they maintained their weight loss? Yes, but those people are very few and far between, and I would hazard a guess that a lot of them would also recommend that it is not the most optimal way of losing weight. And that brings us on to point 2, which is kind of similar, and that is that it's just not sustainable. It's not a sustainable way of eating, it's not an enjoyable way of eating, and while you may be able to find ways to make it work in the short term, in the long term, it is going to be just draining. There are physiological reasons as to why a 1200 calorie diet is just not going to be optimal, and I'm going to go into them in a second, but I just think it is so important to really put yourself in the mind frame of having to do this day in and day out and not have that much food coming in and try to do everything that you need to do in your life and have energy for. It's just a really difficult place to be, and it's a choice that you are making. You don't need to do it. So why would we make that choice? Why wouldn't we just try to make that deficit a little bit smaller and maybe have our expectations a little bit longer term, but be able to live our lives in the meantime, enjoy the process. I lost 30 kilos around 7-8 years ago now, and I am the first person to admit that this is not a short-term process. I am still, to this day, doing things and changing things and adapting things and learning lessons and reflecting back on things that have worked in the past. But what has really helped me is setting up a sustainable way of eating and building my knowledge over that time and having that expectation of it's going to take a long time and knowing that there is no end to this process. When we think of weight maintenance, that means fluctuations. That means you're going to be gaining weight at certain times, you're going to be losing weight, there's going to be constant fluctuations, your motivation is going to change. What I can always rely on is the fact that I have built a sustainable lifestyle around that, and so all I need to do now is just twist the dials a little bit. And had I rushed that process and maybe done it in a less optimal way through eating less calories and being super restrictive, I think it would make where I am now very, very challenging. Sustainability and consistency really is key, and if you can make it sustainable, you can make it consistent, and ultimately that is what is going to get you to where you want to go. That's the same for exercise, that's the same for career progression, it's the same for relationships. If you can remain consistent with what you're doing, that will lead to where you want to go, but you need to have sustainability to be able to be consistent. Okay, I probably said sustainable and consistent a few too many times now, so we're going to move on to the physiological reasons as to why 1200 calories is just too low. So the big one that comes to mind when we talk about weight loss and low calorie diets is adaptive thermogenesis, but you may have heard it referred to as a slow metabolism or metabolism slowing, or even starvation mode. So what is adaptive thermogenesis? Well, it's actually pretty smart. If your body hasn't got the amount of energy coming in that's actually required every single day, it's going to put something in place to start reducing how much energy it's expending, and that is, simply put, adaptive thermogenesis. Essentially, it's your body's response to less energy coming in than it requires. So your body is going to reduce how much energy it's expending by maybe making you a little bit slower, and you might not realize these things, but you just might not be as active as you perhaps had been. Or when you go to exercise, you're not going to perform optimally because your body's trying to conserve a little bit of energy, or maybe it will alter some of the digestion that you're doing. So your body is essentially adapting itself to a lower amount of calories coming in, as a survival mechanism. I always think this is just so cool. When you really think about it, it's pretty awesome that your body is just trying to look out for you. So if you're in a relatively small deficit between 10 and 20%, you're not going to notice a significant amount of change from that adaptation. However, if you make that deficit larger, aka consuming 1200 calories a day, it's going to be noticeable, and it's going to affect things like your mood, your energy levels, your sleep, and these things are going to make weight loss in the long term a lot harder for so many different reasons. So while we'd expect to see adaptive thermogenesis or a slowdown in metabolism if you're indeed losing weight or in a calorie deficit, what we want is to really find that sweet spot. While we're talking about that sweet spot and having balance, over a long period of time, if you were to eat 1200 calories, there is a chance that you might start to lack certain nutrients in your diet that you might get if you just had a little bit more variety or more play in how many calories you are consuming a day. Or there is the possibility that you might start to restrict some of the food groups that are more calorie dense, such as, let's say, dietary fats, which are actually essential to have in your diet. Okay, next up is the impact it may have on fitness goals. And this can be quite significant because commonly when people embark on a weight loss journey, they will tend to also start training or exercising in some way. Now, I always say that exercise should be something that you enjoy. It should be some time for you to take out of your day to spend on you with your own thoughts, doing something that makes you happy, challenging your body, learning new skills, whatever it is that floats your boat. That should be the reason that you exercise rather than for weight loss. But obviously they tend to go hand in hand. Now, it's a bit of a catch-22 because if you wanted to lose weight but you also want to work on certain fitness goals, you kind of want to be in an optimal position to be able to achieve those fitness goals, and that tends to mean getting energy in so that you can optimally perform when you work out. Again, it comes down to not being too drastic with what you're doing. If you're consuming far too little energy to what you need, but you're also training and exerting yourself to a really, really high extent, it's going to just be a recipe for disaster in the long run. If you can just bring it in a little bit and be able to have a slightly smaller deficit, but also be able to train and really enjoy your workouts and push yourself, it's going to be that perfect sweet spot that you really want to achieve. But it's also going to help in terms of having more energy to go and do your workouts or just being generally more active, and also reducing the risk of injury and actually seeing progress in your exercise as well. And all of these things collectively means that you're going to be able to sustain this for a longer period, and you're also going to enjoy the process a lot more. So it's a total win-win. The impact of low energy from eating in such a large calorie deficit is not going to only impact exercise performance, but it's going to impact so many different factors in your life, which in turn are going to impact your ability to lose weight in the long run. A couple of these you might notice are poorer concentration, potentially poorer coordination, lack of wanting to socialize, poorer sleeping habits. There are so many, and all of these will go into making weight loss harder in the long run. Really, it just comes down to being able to completely avoid making it so hard for ourselves. Weight loss can be enjoyable, dare I say it. It can be exciting, it can be interesting. You're learning about your body, you're trying different things and just seeing what works for you. And it doesn't need to be as hard as it's made out to be. And that brings us on to the last point that I wanted to talk about, and that is that it can just lead to bad eating habits and overall mental health. Now, this is a big one because I always talk about this balance between physical health and mental health. Really, there isn't one without the other, and there is no point in being in peak physical health when your mental health is on the floor, and vice versa. I've mentioned this in the past that there's been times where I have looked and probably been the healthiest and fittest I've ever been, but my mental health has been the worst, and vice versa, where I have probably been the most unhealthy and perhaps overweight that I've ever been, and my mental health has been the best it's ever been. And really, it's about trying to find the balance between the two. Hypothetically, if you were eating 1200 calories a day and you weren't enjoying what you were eating and you were tired all the time and you couldn't train, but it was something that you really wanted to do or you enjoyed, and that you started to pull away from social occasions because you were either too tired or it started to give you anxiety about how you were going to fit that in your day, maybe you'd start to think, I might restrict a meal here, or I might just cut this out here. It starts to become more detrimental than beneficial. I've always maintained that losing weight didn't make me happy. I thought it would. I got there and I realized that it didn't. And there's so many other things that have fulfilled me and have brought me happiness, regardless of weight loss. I always mention that I'm far more critical of myself now than I was before I lost any weight, and I maintain that there is so much more to life than the way that your body looks and racing towards reaching a goal, because chances are that from my experience and what I see in other people, you may get there and realize that it's not what you thought it was going to be. What I found is that I learned so much about myself on the journey here. And like I say, it's been a long time now, but I learned so much about myself. You'll learn about your preferences, you'll learn about what works for you, and that might change in the future, but that information is invaluable to being able to create the freedom and the happiness and the intuition that you might want in the future, so that you don't feel like this is always just a race to the end. In my experience, the people that have lost weight and successfully maintained it have always taken a slow and steady approach without too many expectations on themselves in a short time frame. And I think this is critical. Good things take time, and what feels like forever right now will just be a mere memory in the future. The other common thing that I see with successful weight loss is just them finding and working through what works for them, and then from there just adjusting the dials depending on what happens in their life. It really is different for everybody, and it should be treated like that, which is why just saying a blanket 1200 calories a day just seems crazy. I really hope this video has helped in some way to clear up some of the noise that you might have heard around 1200 calorie diets. If you want more videos on nutrition and calorie deficits and all that sort of stuff, I'll put some down below that you can have a look at. Otherwise, I will let you guys get on with your day. Don't be mean to yourselves, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!